The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas says that Israel must be held accountable after the UN said Tel Aviv may have committed war crimes in Gaza. A senior Hamas official says the UN report on the Israeli crackdown on Gaza protesters proves Israeli forces committed crimes against humanity. Bassem Naim says Palestinians may have been protesting peacefully to demand the right of return and an end to the Israeli siege. Rights groups including Amnesty International have also called for further action to hold Israel accountable. According to UN investigators, Israel's killing of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip could constitute war crimes.
The Israeli security forces committed serious violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. These violations clearly warrant criminal investigation and prosecution.
Saying that they have intentionally shot children, they've intentionally shot people with disabilities, they've intentionally shot journalists, knowing them to be children, people with disabilities and journalists.
That may amount to, crimes against humanity, which is somewhat what you're reflecting by talking about a systematic approach. It may amount to that.
Well, according to the report, the Palestinians did not pose an imminent threat to others when they were shot. The panel has delivered to the UN rights body confidential information about those responsible for the killings, including Israeli snipers and commanders. It says the details were being given to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who would share it with the International Criminal Court. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed and thousands more injured by Israeli forces during weekly protests in Gaza since March 30th. last year. Joining us here on this edition of Press TV's News Review, we have Vice Chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Mr. Kemal Hawash, who's joining us from London, and also spokesman of the Neturei Karta International, Rabbi David Weiss, who's with us from New York. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Hawash in London. First of all, give us your thoughts on this recent report issued by the United Nations.
It's shocking. This report is a shocking indictment of Israel and its policy. Not only is Israel an apartheid state, which the world should be shunning for its discrimination and racism, here now we have evidence by an independent panel which looked at its crimes over 48 weeks since the start of the March of Return, in which Israel, its snipers, its planes, it's used the most sophisticated weapons it has to kill and maim Palestinians. Shocking that 25,000 or more Palestinians have been injured. Shocking that it has targeted children in the chest. That is never accidental. When a sniper who has the most sophisticated rifle to hand shoots a child in the chest who is away more than 100 meters from him, that is deliberate, a deliberate kill. It's as if they are practicing target practice against Palestinian children. And when they target medics, that's a crime in itself. When they target journalists, that's another crime. Razan al-Najjar was one of these medics who was killed back in July of last year. She was fasting. She had gone to the border to help other people, but an Israeli terrorist in uniform, and that's really what they are, an Israeli terrorist in uniform, shot her in the chest and killed her while she was trying to tend for the injured. But it isn't only about documenting the crimes. Israel's crimes have been documented for 71 years. What we need is for the world to finally act. It is no good for governments, including the British government here, to say that Israel is entitled to self-defense when it is killing and maiming men, women, children, medics, and journalists. It is time for action against this rogue state.
Let's bring in Mr. Weiss as well. Rabbi Weiss, shocking was the word used by Mr. Hawash in London. What's also shocking is the inaction of the international community with regards to the Israeli crimes. Give us your thoughts on the United Nations report, and when will we see action on behalf of the international community? Rabbi Weiss, are you with us? All right, it appears that we're experiencing some technical difficulties with the connection. We're going to continue.
Oh, do you hear me? Yes, do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, continue,
Hello?
sir. Continue, please.
Hello? Yes. Will we...
All right, we don't have our guest, unfortunately, at this point from New York. Mr. Hawash, I'm going to go back to you. Mr. Hawash, in London, the big question is, you mentioned that the world needs to act now. How long and how far are we going to see these platitudes coming from the likes of the United Nations with no action following them?
Well, it isn't just the United Nations. The European Union commissioned a report which was published a couple of weeks ago, which documented settlements and their violations of international law. So it isn't just one body, it's one body after the other. And when you think that this particular body which produced the report, the Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights Council, has been condemned by the Americans who withdrew from it, has been condemned by the British government here, because it is seen to be unfair to Israel. Unfair to Israel? Just look at the evidence presented. Those children and women and men who have been killed and maimed, they can't be brought back. The Israeli snipers go back to their homes, to their family, and they are completely unaccountable for the action. I remind your viewers that at the start of this, on the 30th of March, an Israeli IDF spokesman said, "We know where every bullet lands." So there's nothing accidental about this. It is a policy to deliberately kill and maim, shooting young men in the knees, increasing the number of disabled people, the number of amputees. And Israel was crying wolf because its team for the Paralympics was not welcome in Malaysia, when it is actually creating a Palestinian Paralympic team through shooting young men and others in the knees. It's absolutely disgraceful, and it is time the international community stopped talking and condemning and acted to make this pariah state a state that is sanctioned and boycotted until it ends its absolutely grievous crimes against the Palestinian people.
All right, thanks a lot. Vice Chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Mr. Kamal Hawash, joining us from the British capital, London. And with that, it brings us to an end here on this edition of Press TV's News Review. Stay tuned, there's plenty more to come here on Press TV. Bye for now.